Most of my time is just to get up in the morning.
Andy Warhol spent his final months creating art nobody talks about. He made paintings with his own urine. He drew explicit images of body parts. He documented every conversation, every scandal, every secret. But his last sketchbook contained something different. One page was so shocking that when his assistants found it, they covered it in black ink. The page wasn't about celebrities or soup cans. It was about the real reason he was terrified of hospitals. What he drew explains why a simple surgery killed him. The truth was hidden for decades. Andy Warhol was born on August 6, 1928, in a poor little apartment in Pittsburgh. His full name back then was Andrew Warhola. His parents had come to America from Slovakia, trying to escape hunger and hard times. But life in Pittsburgh wasn't much easier. They lived in a small apartment with barely enough space for their family. His father, Andre, worked in dangerous jobs like mining and construction. He came home every night covered in dirt, worn out, but still trying to smile for his children. They moved around a lot because they couldn't afford to stay in one place too long. One of their homes was on Beelan Street, another on Dawson Street. It was a tough neighborhood, filled with other poor immigrant families who were also just trying to survive. Andy grew up wearing old clothes passed down from his brothers Paul and John. There were times when they didn't even have enough money for food. His mother Julia did everything she could to keep the family going, often sewing, cleaning, and praying. In 1936, when Andy was just 8 years old, something terrible happened. He got very sick with a condition called Sydenham's chorea. His body started shaking, and he couldn't control it. He had to stay in bed for weeks. Sometimes he would lie there completely still, staring at the ceiling, afraid he might never be normal again. His skin turned pale, his hair thinned. He missed so much school because of it. And when he did go, the other kids made fun of him. They called him names and pushed him around for looking different. But during all those quiet hours at home, his mother brought him magazines filled with pictures of movie stars. Greta Garbo, Shirley Temple. Andy would stare at them and start to draw. He'd cut out their faces and make collages. He was trapped in his body, but in his mind, he was free. That small kitchen table where he lay became his first studio. He later said that being sick like that actually helped him become who he was. Around that same time, his parents gave him a little brownie camera. He built a tiny dark room in their basement and started taking pictures. That camera became one of the most important tools in his life. Even though he would grow up to be known for wild parties and strange friends, Andy always kept something deeply private about himself. His mother, Julia, was extremely religious. She prayed every single day and took Andy with her to the Byzantine Catholic Church. The church was filled with golden icons and images of saints. Andy would just sit and stare at them for hours. They gave him comfort. They gave him inspiration. And even after he became famous, even after all the flashy nights in New York, he still secretly went to church many times a week. He even helped pay for his nephew to become a priest and used to quietly serve food at homeless shelters. When he died in 1987, over 2,000 people came to St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York to remember him. And one art historian shocked everyone by saying Andy had helped convert someone to faith before he passed. But the moment that changed everything came in May 1942. Andy was just 13 years old when his father died. Andrzej had been working in West Virginia, and he drank some contaminated water on the job. Because he had already been sick from a surgery years earlier, his body couldn't fight off the infection. He died from tuberculosis peritonitis. When they brought his body home, they laid it in their tiny living room for 3 full days, just like their religious tradition said they should. Andy was so scared he ran and hid. He couldn't even look at his father's face. After that, life got even harder. Andy and his brother Paul started going door to door selling fruits and vegetables. Andy would also sketch people on the street for a few cents. The family didn't have money for real art lessons, so Andy ordered mail-in courses and practiced at home. School didn't get any easier. Because of his illness, Andy looked different from the other kids. His skin was light, his nose was slightly off-center, his voice was soft. Classmates bullied him constantly. They punched him. They laughed at how he walked and talked. Sometimes he just stayed home and refused to go back. All of this left deep scars. Even when he grew up, he couldn't stop thinking about how he looked. He even had surgery later to fix his nose. But instead of letting the bullying break him, Andy did something else. He turned it into his armor. In the 1960s, he dyed his hair silver. He wore wigs, makeup, and scarves. He became someone no one could ignore. The kid they used to beat up became the man who made being different into a kind of power. In high school, Andy didn't just survive, he surprised everyone. At Shenley High School in Pittsburgh, he graduated in 1945 at just 16 years old. Out of 278 students, he ranked 51st. Teachers didn't know what to make of him. While other kids were drawing bowls of fruit, Andy was sketching soup cans and toothpaste tubes. He'd win big art awards, but still be seen as strange. His illness was still affecting him, but all those hours stuck in bed had trained his eyes to see the world differently. He didn't want to paint flowers, he wanted to paint fame. Later that year, in September 1945, Andy got into the Carnegie Institute of Technology. He was one of 60 freshmen in the art program. Because the war had just ended, most of the students were women. Andy struggled in school. His old illness had left his hands shaky, and he couldn't always paint neatly. Some professors wanted to kick him out, but other students, mostly veterans, stood by him. The school focused on commercial design, not fancy fine art, so Andy found a place there. He worked hard, even drawing covers for the student magazine. He finally graduated in 1949 with a Bachelor of Fine Arts. During college summers, he worked in Pittsburgh department stores doing window displays. He learned how to grab people's attention, how to arrange products like they were part of a story. But even then, his art was seen as too feminine. His lines were soft, his colors delicate. Some clients didn't like it, but Andy kept going. The most important influence in his college life was a teacher named Robert Lepper. He taught Andy to look at everyday objects like they were art. Soup cans, bottles, simple things. Andy started drawing his family's meals, which later turned into his most famous paintings. Lepper even encouraged Andy to explore his own identity. In 1949, Andy made a shocking self-portrait, standing completely nude, except for a pair of Mary Jane shoes. In a conservative city like Pittsburgh, that was almost unthinkable. That same year, Andy took the biggest risk of his life. In June 1949, just after graduating, he packed a bag, grabbed $200 his mother had saved, and boarded a train to New York City. He moved into a tiny apartment in a bohemian part of town with a classmate named Philip Pearlstein. Andy also dropped the A from his last name and became simply Andy Warhol. He wanted a fresh start. On his second day in New York, he walked straight into the office of Glamour magazine and introduced himself. That bold move changed everything. They asked him to draw shoes for an ad. He got the job. And just like that, his career had begun. Andy Warhol was just a commercial illustrator when he started painting soup cans in November 1961. He painted 32 canvases, each showing a different flavor of Campbell's soup. By July 9, 1962, his work was being shown in Los Angeles. That moment changed everything. The art world was shocked. Nobody had seen grocery store items in a gallery before. Warhol had traced each soup can from a projector and painted them by hand. Critics weren't sure if it was art or a joke, but Warhol said he ate that soup every day for 20 years. That was his world, and now he was showing it to everyone. That same year, in 1961, Warhol saw Roy Lichtenstein's Mickey Mouse painting at a gallery. It crushed him. He thought Lichtenstein had stolen his ideas about turning commercial images into art. They both were using mass media as inspiration. Lichtenstein used comic book dots, and Warhol used silkscreen prints. The rivalry was quiet but deep. They watched each other's moves and even collected each other's work. Warhol once turned Lichtenstein into a portrait, making his competitor part of his own art. Critics argued for decades about who truly started pop art, but both men were changing how the world looked at advertising and cartoons. Then, in August 1962, something tragic happened. Marilyn Monroe died. Just weeks later, Warhol made a giant artwork using one of her publicity photos from 1953. It was called the Marilyn Diptych. On one side, her face was in bright colors. On the other, it faded into black and white. People were stunned. Some were angry, saying Warhol was using her death to sell art. But others saw it as a tribute. He used the format of religious paintings, like altarpieces, turning Monroe into a modern saint. That piece made Warhol famous in a whole new way. The Guardian would later call it one of the most important artworks of modern times. In January 1964, Warhol moved his studio to a new building. Within days, wooden boxes started arriving. He spent weeks turning them into life-sized Brillo soap pad boxes. They looked exactly like what you'd see in a supermarket. He displayed them at the Stable Gallery in April 1964. Critics were furious. Some said it wasn't even art, but Warhol didn't care. He said making Brillo boxes gave him something to do. Each one cost $4,000 to make, but barely sold. That moment made people question everything they thought they knew about sculpture and galleries. That same year, Warhol was invited to create a mural for the 1964 New York World's Fair. He chose mugshots of real criminals taken from a police booklet from 1962. The mural showed faces of 13 wanted men. It went up on April 15, 1964, but within days, officials painted over it in silver. They were scared of the controversy. When the fair opened, all people saw was a big silver wall. Warhol didn't fight back. Instead, he quietly made smaller versions of the paintings and showed them in Paris in 1967. He had once again turned censorship into attention. In 1964, Warhol built something unforgettable. He covered the walls of his studio with silver foil and turned it into a place called the Factory. This wasn't just a workspace. It became a wild place full of artists, drag queens, addicts, and outsiders. Between 1963 and 1968, Warhol made more than 650 experimental films there. He wanted to work like a machine. People came in and out all day and night. He even said in 1963, "I want to be a machine." The Factory was his machine. In March 1965, Warhol met a 21-year-old socialite named Edie Sedgwick at a birthday party. He was 36 at the time. They became instantly close. Warhol turned her into a star, filming her constantly. But by 1966, she had pulled away. She fell in love with Bob Dylan, and Warhol felt betrayed. She demanded that Warhol stop showing her films. She moved into the Chelsea Hotel and sank deeper into drug use. By 1971, she was dead. She had once been the queen of New York parties, but Warhol let her go when she became too broken. Later that same year, in September 1966, Warhol released his most shocking film yet. It was called Chelsea Girls. The film lasted 3 hours, and showed raw scenes of drugs, sex, and breakdowns. It was filmed at the Chelsea Hotel and the factory. Warhol used a split-screen technique so that two scenes played at once, but only one had sound. It made viewers feel confused, almost like they were on drugs. Some cities banned it. Even the Chelsea Hotel threatened to sue, but the film made money and got national attention. Warhol had shocked the country again. In 1965, Warhol discovered a rock band called the Velvet Underground. He produced their debut album, which came out in 1967. The cover had a banana on it that people could peel off to reveal pink underneath. It was sexual, on purpose. But the real shock came from the songs. They sang about heroin and sadomasochism. Warhol added them to his live shows, projecting films while they played. The band and Warhol's art mixed together into a storm of music, sex, and drug culture that people had never seen before. Between 1965 and 1967, Warhol recorded hours of conversations with his friend Ondine. In 1968, he turned the messy transcripts into a book called A Novel. It was over 450 pages long and full of typos, curses, and drug talk. He didn't edit a thing. One typist refused to write the bad words. Another's mother threw out entire tapes. Warhol wanted it that way. He wanted it to feel real, raw, and shocking. Some of the people in the book later sued him, claiming he used their lives without permission. That same year, on June 3, 1968, Valerie Solanas walked into the factory with a gun. She had written a book called The Scum Manifesto and thought Warhol was trying to steal her play. She shot him 3 times. The bullets went through his chest, stomach, liver, and lungs. He was declared dead at the hospital, but a doctor massaged his heart and brought him back. Surgery took 6 hours. He had to wear a medical corset for the rest of his life. The pain never left. The factory had to change too. No more open doors. Warhol had become terrified. Solanas surrendered hours later and told police Warhol had too much control over her life. She was sentenced to just 3 years. Warhol didn't press charges, but he was never the same again. Friends said he became jumpy, quiet, and paranoid. He hired full-time security. The factory moved. His art also changed. He moved away from the wild films and focused on celebrity portraits that made him millions. In October 1969, Warhol launched Interview magazine. It started as a film journal but quickly became a gossip magazine. Warhol blurred fact and fiction, making up quotes and stories to grab attention. He didn't pay many of the young artists who helped. But the magazine grew fast, helped by parties at Studio 54 and Warhol's flair for shocking people. In 1972, he painted Chairman Mao of China in bright pop art colors. Chinese officials were furious. They banned the paintings. But in 2006, one of the portraits sold for $17.4 million. Warhol had turned a dictator into pop art. When his museum tried to take the works to Beijing in 2012, they were told, "The mouse won't work." His series called Death and Disaster also sparked anger. It showed car crashes, suicides, and electric chairs. People said he was turning pain into money. Some of his own factory friends had died from overdoses, and critics blamed him for glamorizing death. But Warhol said he was just showing what the media showed. In the early 1970s, Warhol started designing fashion too. He made shoes with diamond dust. Around 1972, the IRS began investigating him for tax evasion. They found out he had been selling art, but claiming it was worth less to avoid paying taxes. His Upper East Side home was full of hidden art and antiques. People who once saw him as a real artist now called him a businessman in disguise. Then came his strangest work yet. Between 1977 and 1978, Warhol made what became known as the piss paintings. He and his assistants urinated on copper-covered canvases to create chemical reactions. He even asked people not to pee in the morning so the colors would be stronger later. It was shocking. Most galleries refused to show them, but Warhol didn't stop. Around this time, he was also exploring New York's queer nightlife and working on sexually graphic series called Sex Parts and Torso. Andy Warhol spent most of his life trapped inside his own body. In the 1980s, that feeling got worse. He began painting strange self-portraits, where he wore a silver wig and stared blankly at the viewer. These became known as his fright wig portraits. But the real fear was inside him. When he was 29, back in the 1950s, he had surgery on his nose. It wasn't a real nose job, just a small attempt to fix something he hated. Still, he remained unhappy. Even his early drawings made fun of his nose. He once changed his own passport photo just to see what he might look like with a more perfect face. By the time he became famous, Andy was still full of shame. He hated his scars from the 1968 shooting. He hated losing his hair. He hated looking in the mirror. In 2017, the Andy Warhol Museum held an exhibition called My Perfect Body, showing how his artwork was really about his deep discomfort with how he looked. A painting from 1962 called Before and After. 4 shows a plastic surgery ad with a woman's nose being reshaped. That wasn't just a commentary on beauty culture. It was Andy's own cry for help. He didn't talk much about love, but he had relationships that left him heartbroken. He lived with Jed Johnson, an interior designer, for many years. But in 1980, Warhol met a young executive from Paramount Pictures named John Gould. Andy was 52, and Gould was 27. They met through a photographer friend and started seeing each other. Warhol fell fast. In his diary, he wrote, "I should try to fall in love, and that's what I'm doing now with John Gould." Their relationship lasted until 1985, but it was full of secrets. Gould was afraid of being outed, and Andy became more and more paranoid because of the AIDS epidemic. When Gould got sick, Andy became terrified. He told his staff to keep Gould's dishes and laundry separate. In September 1986, Gould died from AIDS. He was only 33 years old and weighed just 70 pounds. Warhol was so shaken he couldn't even write about it. He just scribbled in his diary, "I can't write about it." Behind the bright colors and pop images, Andy was hiding something else. From 1974 to 1987, he filled over 600 boxes with receipts, notes, half-eaten food, dead bugs, and letters. These became known as his time capsules. They contained over 300,000 items. He put in everything, even junk, because he couldn't throw things away. He was afraid he might need them again. It was more than just collecting. It was a deep fear of losing control, of losing pieces of his life. Today, those boxes are stored at the Andy Warhol Museum in Pittsburgh and still reveal details about how he lived day by day. Even in his last years, Andy's work took a surprising turn. In 1986, he began painting versions of The Last Supper, the famous image of Jesus and his disciples. He created over 100 versions. Some were giant, like 60 Last Suppers, which became the biggest painting he ever made. It was 116 inches tall and over 32 feet long. The idea came from a gallery owner in Milan in 1984. Some of these paintings were even shown right across from the church that holds the original Last Supper by Leonardo da Vinci. People thought it was strange because Warhol always seemed like an atheist, but he actually went to church almost every week and even met the Pope in 1980. The painting meant something personal to him. His mother kept a print of the Last Supper in their kitchen when he was growing up. Some people think he painted these to deal with his fear of death, especially after losing John Gould. His art also led him into legal trouble. In the 1980s, Warhol was sued several times for using other people's photos in his work. One of those cases exploded decades later. In 2023, long after Warhol had died, the Supreme Court ruled against his foundation. It all started with a 1981 photo of prints taken by Lynn Goldsmith. Warhol had turned that photo into silk screens. Then, in 2016, his foundation sold one of those images to Vanity Fair for $10,000. Goldsmith had only been paid $1,000 originally. The court decided that Warhol's art wasn't different enough from the original photo. They said he had crossed the line. The decision shocked the art world because it changed how artists could legally use other people's work. Even 36 years after his death, Warhol was still making headlines. The truth is, Warhol was always documenting his life. From 1976 until just 5 days before his death in 1987, he dictated a daily diary over the phone to his friend Pat Hackett. He wrote about famous people and parties, but the real pain was hidden between the lines. He was afraid of hospitals. He hated being alone. In December 1980, after breaking up with Jed Johnson, he had his assistant send John Gould a dozen roses every day for 2 weeks. But by the mid-1980s, his health was falling apart. He had gallbladder problems for years, but was too scared to get surgery. Finally, on February 20th, 1987, Warhol checked into New York Hospital. He went into surgery the next day. The operation took 4 hours. The doctor said his gallbladder was almost bursting. Warhol seemed okay afterward. He even made phone calls and watched TV. But at 4:30 a.m. on February 22nd, his nurse noticed he had turned blue. She didn't call for help until over an hour later. By then, it was too late. Warhol died at 6:31 a.m. He was 58 years old. His estate sued the hospital, claiming gross negligence. In 1987, they settled the case for $3 million. His autopsy revealed something even darker. Warhol had been using amphetamines for years. He weighed only 128 pounds and was severely dehydrated. Doctors also found damage from the 1968 shooting. He wore tight girdles every day to hold in his intestines. His organs were so damaged that the simple surgery became a major risk. In court records, the doctors said his body was already too weak to survive. After his death, his will shocked everyone. He left almost everything to create the Andy Warhol Foundation for the Visual Arts. His family got very little. The total estate was finally valued at $220 million in July 1993, even though some thought it was worth over $600 million. The legal battles were brutal. Some people said Warhol had hidden millions in bank accounts and storage units. The art market was in chaos. The foundation had to spend over $1 million just trying to prove which artworks were real. Eventually, the Authentication Board shut down in 2012 because they were being sued so often. And the scandals kept coming. In 2024, a family in Florida sued a Miami gallery for selling them fake Warhol paintings worth $6 million. People were even pretending to be auction house experts to trick buyers. There were other dark secrets too. People who worked with Warhol at his studio, called The Factory, began speaking out. Poet John Giorno starred in Warhol's 1963 film Sleep, which showed him sleeping for 6 hours. Warhol made money from that film, but Giorno never got paid. Transgender actress Holly Woodlawn said in her memoir that Warhol pressured her into sex acts for money. The factory was supposed to be a place for outcasts and dreamers, but many of them felt used. Victor Hugo, a designer and former friend, once said Warhol's diaries were so cruel they felt like being gang-raped and beaten by a dead person. Even Warhol's diaries caused trouble. After they were published, they revealed 807 pages of gossip, all based on over 20,000 pages of phone conversations. Some people were furious. Fashion designer Halston threatened to sue before he died of AIDS in 1989. Model Barbara Allen said Warhol made things up. Bianca Jagger actually sued him for libel. She said Andy didn't even write most of it.